Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. But before we get into any basketball talk, gotta talk about the updates that are coming to the channel. Nothing really crazy that is going to be happening to our content that has been coming out recently. We're still going to be doing the Let's Talk About It with basketball, more in-depth analysis and breakdowns of what's going on in the NBA world. We're still going to have our regular podcast with NFL, NBA talk, but we're also going to be adding, just kind of branching out into different aspects, becoming not just a podcast channel, but more so just a sports channel in general, just being able to break down stuff that's going on in the NFL. I know that's off-season time right now for them. We're still going to have some NFL content coming up this summer as well. It's more so we're going to be adding interviews, specific interviews. We got some interviews lined up down the line in the summer. That's going to be coming out soon. And then we also have some gaming content on the way as well, just kind of really getting more hands-on into like 2K rebuilds, kind of really seeing how everything plans out, and some of these off-season videos I do in a simulation type of setting like 2K, even though 2K can kind of be a little up and down depending on the simulation you get. But we're still going to get more hands-on in terms of what we think could possibly happen this offseason going into the NBA world, especially also into the NFL world, especially when the new Madden comes out. We still got NCAA to come out, possibly get some content going on with that as well. But the interviews and the gaming content are definitely on their way this summer, especially we got a ton of great content coming out this summer. Just stay tuned for that. But without further ado, we have to get into some more playoff basketball talk. We can start out with the Pacers. Pacers have been swept 4-0 by the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics advanced to the NBA Finals, but the Pacers, man, so I'm going to kind of give my take, and I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask a question because I'm a neutral fan. I don't have a dog in this fight, a dog left in the playoffs. So from my point of view, I want to ask a question with Pacers fans. But before I get into that, just talking about this team overall, I mean, the addition of Pascal Siakam has turned into one of the best trade deadline acquisitions, like, past couple of years, in my opinion. I mean, taking this team to the conference finals, they don't do that without Pascal Siakam, even with some of the teams they did play. And when I'm going to also get into that as well right now is on both sides of the spectrum. I'm going to talk about more with Boston, but with Pacers fans, you have to just play who's in front of you. If you're a Pacers fan and you hop on Twitter and they're like, oh, Pacers are only here because of this and that. Yeah, you're right. They probably are. But go back and look at another championship team or another team that made a deep playoff run. They're probably only there because of this injury or that injury. You have to have luck to make deep runs in the playoffs. It just is what it is. You can go back and look at every single championship that has been won in the NBA. At some point throughout that championship run, some luck was put forth. When you look at, I've been seeing a lot of clips of to this day, a couple years ago, I think it might be today on this day, where the Houston Rockets missed 27 straight three-pointers in a game against the Golden State Warriors at home, where they were up at half. It's luck. It's luck. From me being a Warriors fan, it is luck at some points. There has to be luck in sports. At some point, there is some lucky instances where this player gets hurt. Not saying it's just all injury-based, but there's just some lucky stuff that happens on championship runs. It has to happen. Sports is hard. It's hard. So, like, I'm not going to look at the Pacers team any differently because they went on a run. I have a question to ask about them to Pacers fans specifically. But, like, I'm not going to hound them or hound the Celtics based on the path that they got. Celtics, I have a little different path with them that I'll get into when we get into that. But looking at the question I do have to ask Pacers fans, do you think this roster has currently constructed would be in the same position if the Knicks and the Bucks were healthy? If this Pacers team has currently constructed, played the healthy Knicks team and a healthy Bucks team, would they be in this position? Based on your answer to that question, I can tell you what you need to do this offseason. Because my personal opinion, being a neutral fan, the answer is no. They would not be in this current position. They wouldn't. It's just being honest. When they were up 0-2, the OG Anunoby injury changed the entirety of the series. Also the Nembhard 3, but the OG Anunoby was huge. The injury for him was huge. The Bucks injury, Giannis didn't play the entire series. Damian Lillard didn't play a couple games during that series. As this roster is currently constructed, I don't think they get to the same position if both those teams are healthy. Like I just said, I'm not going to hound this team on them making a run to the conference finals. But when it comes to off-season talk and team construction, I will ask that question because it comes into play. I compare this team a ton to the Atlanta Hawks team that made it to the conference finals with Trae Young. I compare that to that team a ton because they have a young guard and a young-ish roster to where they haven't really had that deep playoff experience, but they made that run, made it to the conference finals. But in the Hawks case, they haven't been able to get back. And when you're looking at and you're asking questions about how good Trae Young was playing, like a Tyrese Halliburton in a way, how they've had this, Tyrese Halliburton's had a great year. When you're looking at that, you would think they're automatically going to be back in this position. Being a young team, have a young driving force, but they haven't been back there yet. Roster construction. That question is why, and you give me an answer to that question, is why I know what you need to do this offseason. Because if your answer is no, then you probably need to go into this offseason really trying to bulk up your roster to compete with the rest of the Eastern Conference. Because you got to think next year, Bucks are going to reload. They're probably going to be healthy. Knicks are probably going to be healthy. They're going to reload, and they have assets to get even better on top of what they already were this year. Philadelphia has a ton of cap space. They're going to get better. They still have Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Like, the Celtics ain't going on anywhere. They got their whole group, their starting five, wrapped up for the next couple of years. You don't know what the Cavs are going to do. Orlando's in the realm. Orlando took the Cavs 7 games, so it's going to be very interesting to see how they attack this offseason. And I know we'll get into offseason talk and offseason videos later down the line, but kind of just giving my initial thoughts talking about the Pacers offseason. Their free agents are Pascal Siakam, Doug McDermott, James Johnson, Jalen Smith, and Obi Toppin, just some of their notable ones. Jalen Smith is a player option. Obi Toppin's restricted. Obviously, Pascal Siakam, you're going to do whatever it takes to bring him back. You're going to pay him whatever amount of money you need to pay him because you gave up a lot to get him. Doug McDermott, James Johnson, you could probably let them walk. Jalen Smith, player option. I don't really know the exact dollar amount on that. Obi Toppin, I feel like Obi Toppin is somebody they have to bring back. When I'm looking at this Pacers team, a lot of their success has been built off their depth. Obi Toppin and TJ McConnell, Ben Shepherd, all been huge for them coming off that bench. Looking at that, I think Obi Toppin is a guy that they definitely need to prioritize bringing back, especially if they do want to kind of even add more depth to that bench and some of the moves I think they could be looking to make. But the Pascal Siakam and Obi out of your free agencies guys, I think you need to prioritize bringing back for sure. Looking at this, what I think this team needs. I think this team could really use another scorer. From what we've seen from Tyrese Halliburton, he has the ability to go off and get you 20 to 30 points in a game with about 10, 12 assists. But I feel like he's so much of a pass-first guy to where you might need somebody else that can go get his own, if that makes sense. You might need somebody else that can go get his own. But that's where it gets confusing with the Pacers, right? I think you could possibly look into getting like a wing. But you got to think, you don't want to bring in anybody that's going to harm Andrew Nembhard's development, because I feel like you've seen some sparks from him this postseason that make you think, okay, we might really have something here with Nembhard, especially in the backcourt next to Tyrese Halliburton. He's steady with the ball. He can score. He can get his own bucket when he needs to. The only question about him was his defense, and that was against Jalen Brunson, who's an all-NBA guard. So looking at that, I mean, and when Tyrese Halliburton went out, we saw him in 2 games against the Boston Celtics really show out. So looking at that, you don't want to bring in another guard that's going to hinder his development, and you still got TJ McConnell on your bench, and he's on contract for another year as well. And then you got to think, the Pacers didn't have Benedict Mathurin, who is a proven scorer for them. Even though he's super young, he was been somebody else that can come off that bench or start and provide them a ton of scoring. So looking at that, he was out for the rest of the season. He got hurt back in like March, so he hasn't been there. He could possibly be a trade candidate depending on what they look to do this offseason, because they did it without him. But I would look to get another wing. I love what Aaron Nesmith has been for them, but I love him even more coming off their bench. With an OB and a TJ and a Nesmith, you could already have them top 3 coming off your bench that could be starters on a lot of different teams in the NBA, I feel like, with what they produce and what they bring off the table. So looking at that, I think they need to establish that wing position, that 3. There's a couple of guys I see. Like I said, I don't really have the dollar amounts of what they're going to have this offseason in cap, because they're going to have to sign Pascal Siakam. They're probably going to sign Obi Toppin. But they have a lot of more so tradable assets that they can definitely dive into. With some of the young talent they have on this team, they still have some draft capital to use. But looking at some guys that I really think could fit what they want to do, I'm not thinking of them going out and getting like a Brandon Ingram type or Paul George type. They need somebody that kind of fits what they're doing, and maybe somebody a little bit more of a veteran role guy. I feel like somebody that you could plug into this offense that can get up and down, run the floor, but somebody that's not going to hinder any of the young talent, if that makes sense. Example of guys is a free agent, DeMar DeRozan. You can say what you want. He's older. I think he could be a perfect vet for this team, because I feel like there was times in the conference finals where they kind of just looked like they were a young team that hasn't been in this situation before. Looking at DeMar DeRozan, you could easily plug him in at that 3 spot. He fits perfectly on this team that really likes to get up and down. And I really thought about the spacing with him and Pascal Siakam, but the Pacers, with the way they play, generate so many good open threes to where I think the spacing wouldn't really be too much of a hinder, because you got to think Nembhard can shoot the 3 ball. Pascal Siakam isn't the best 3-point shooter, but he can still shoot them. Same with DeMar DeRozan. They're kind of in the same kind of dilemma where they operate in the mid-range and get into the basket, but they can still have the ability to knock down 3 if needed. Tyrese Halliburton can shoot the 3 ball. Even TJ McConnell's not the greatest 3-point shooter, but like looking at what they need somebody else that can really operate the offense outside of Tyrese Halliburton at times, and have Tyrese Halliburton more so be able to play off the ball. But they just need another scoring option. I think DeMar DeRozan, depending on the dollar amount you can get him for, and if he would be interested in going to Indiana, I think it'd be very interesting. He's at the top of my guys. I got some free agent guys, and I got some some guys that they could trade for. Then I got some guys that they could possibly trade for on a low that could probably fit what they want to do. So DeMar DeRozan's first name, Miles Bridges. Super athletic wing that can run the floor, do a little bit of everything. It's going to be interesting to see what the Charlotte Hornets do with him. He's a free agent. Kelly Oubre, if you could snag him away from the 76ers, that would be huge, because he just had a great year with the Philadelphia 76ers, and he kind of fits what you want to do, and he gives you another long, lengthy defender that can play multiple positions and guard multiple positions. Going into some guys that they're going to have to trade for, obviously Lauri Markkanen's a big one, depending on how many assets Utah wants for him. It's going to be interesting to see if any team kind of gets in the market for Lauri Markkanen. Mikal Bridges, this is kind of a long shot, because we've seen the package that the Houston Rockets offer them, and they turned that down. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with that. Obviously, Brandon Ingram's going to be a name that gets floated around a lot. I don't know if he fits specifically what this team is doing, but it's going to be interesting to see, and it might be a little bit too much for the Pacers, because they do have to pay Siakam. Halliburton's due for an extension because he made All-NBA. Obi Toppin's going to get a decent little contract probably. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But these next 3 guys, I feel like are really, really more realistic in my opinion, because of what they want to do. I think today I just saw on Twitter that they're open to trading somebody like a Keldon Johnson from the Spurs. You have a young piece in Jarris Walker that you could possibly move, who, if you have the mindset of we're going to extend Siakam, you have Obi Toppin. If you bring those 2 guys back, when is Jarris Walker going to play? He's going to be somebody that could definitely be moved for a guy like Keldon Johnson, who can come in and fit and do what you want, want to do offensively and defensively, because he's a Swiss Army knife kind of a wing who can do a little bit of everything. Next guy up, Cam Johnson. Adding more shooting, somebody who can play the 3 or the 4. I mean, with the way this team plays, Cam Johnson is a knockdown shooter anywhere on the perimeter. I would love to see him in transition being able to spot up and have an ability to get so many open looks. Probably the most open looks he's had from 3 in his entire career, playing with the Tyrese Halliburton and the Pascal Siakam. And then the last one is a guy that I don't really know what kind of assets you would give up for them because of the predicament the other team is in. But for some reason, I like the fit. He's coming off of a rough year, for sure, but he kind of gives you everything you would want. I feel like if you plugged him in, he would be the perfect fit. I know he's coming off of a rough year, but the guy for me right here, like I said, I don't know what assets this other team would want. And he's a little bit expensive, but I just feel like he's the perfect fit out of all the guys I named. Andrew Wiggins. I know he's coming off of a very rough year. This could be a very good buy low situation for Indiana because of that coming off a rough year. If you think you can turn it around with the way you play, could be very interesting. We know he's a proven defender. We know he can score the basketball. He gives you another scoring threat in that starting five next to Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Haliburton. But it's going to be interesting to see when I dive into like the numbers things and see how much cap room, see exactly what contracts add up to for them to possibly make a trade to go get a guy, or if there's going to be content with running it back. That's why I posed that question to Indiana Pacers fans and to really just the general NBA community of like, do you think this Pacers team would be in this position if the Knicks and the Bucks were healthy? Something that needs to happen. Boston Celtics, back to the NBA Finals. Kind of getting into what I talked about with the Pacers. I'm not going to fault the Boston Celtics on their run to getting to the finals. They've lost 2 fucking games. I've never seen... The Boston Celtics are probably one of the best teams we've seen construction-wise since the 2017 Warriors, in my opinion. Like, I've never seen a team get picked on so much. I've never seen a team wanted to be hated on so much like the Celtics. Nobody ever, like, every time I open Twitter or I hop on like any sports media outlet there, it's all about what the Celtics aren't doing, and it's never about what the Celtics are doing. Everybody wants to talk about how the Celtics aren't blowing these teams out. It's the NBA. It's the playoffs. They're going to have close games. They're going to have close games. They've lost 2 games this entire playoff runs to the finals. 2 games. They've lost 2 games in the path to the finals. And they're going to be like, oh, well, the Heat didn't have Jimmy Butler. Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen were hurt. Tyrese Haliburton got hurt to the back end of that series. The difference I have with the Pacers and the Celtics when I talk about their runs is what I wanted to bring up. If those teams were healthy, Boston's still favored. Compared to Indiana, where we're looking at Indiana, how they played teams with injuries, they're not favored in most of those series if those other teams are healthy. But if you're looking at Boston, even if Miami has Jimmy Butler, the same shit probably happens. Cavs have Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen. They still aren't favored with those 2. Tyrese Haliburton's healthy. They still aren't favored against the Celtics. And they took care of their business. Yeah, did they lose the games to the Cavs and the Heat? Sure. It's the playoffs. It's the NBA. I'm not going to fault the Boston Celtics for them not being able to blow every single team out, because that's what the media expects them to do. Everybody wants to hop on how Jason Tatum isn't playing the best basketball. Jason Tatum's turned it up when he's needed to. Jaylen Brown, Eastern Conference Finals MVP. He's turned it up when he's needed to. They have lost 2 games on this entire playoff run so far. Now, have their opponents really geared them up for their finals opponent, which is probably going to be the Dallas Mavericks? That's a whole different conversation. But I'm not going to look at the Boston Celtics any differently for just taking care of business. I'm not going to look at them any differently for taking care of business in their own conference. This is what they want. They get the 1 seed so they can have an easier path. They get the 1 seed so they don't have to play the 2 or the 3 seed. And they get home court. So I don't understand why people are looking at the Boston Celtics like this is just some crazy thing and people want to see the Boston Celtics just fail. And the one thing I do want to bring up, everybody wants to talk about the injuries to the other teams that the Boston Celtics have played. Nobody wants to talk about Kristaps Porzingis being hurt. Nobody wants to talk about Kristaps Porzingis being hurt because it's the Boston Celtics. I just don't know where all this hate is coming from. It's not like the Boston Celtics have won the past 10 championships and we're looking for some kind of parity. Everybody wants to talk about Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, Tyrese Haliburton being hurt. Nobody wants to talk about Kristaps Porzingis being hurt, which is their X factor on the team. 7-footer that can space the floor and protect the rim and rebound. Nobody wants to bring Kristaps Porzingis being hurt up when you talk about the other teams being injured. They're not a whole 100% as well. So I think people need to kind of like look at this Boston Celtics team, and I just feel like it's a lot of, in my opinion, I just think it's a lot of hating. I think people are trying to pick out the little stuff that they can with the Boston Celtics and try to figure out ways that they can really hate on what they're doing. They've lost 2 games this entire playoff run. 2 games. And I feel like every time I turn on any sports media outlet, it's nothing but, oh, they're not doing this, that, and this. They're in the finals. They are in the finals. Now, I understand their expectations might be higher because they've been there before and they've been good. Finals caliber championship contending team for the past couple of seasons, but this is the best team they've had. This is the best team they've had. I understand the expectations are high and you're going to look and evaluate them differently than you would another team in the Eastern Conference, but Just because they're not like blowing teams out and being super, super dominant doesn't mean they're not handling business. This is the NBA. This is the playoffs. They are going to be in close games. Like, I just don't understand what it is when teams talk about the Celtics, and I feel like it's nothing good to say about the Celtics. Even when it comes to like somebody like Jason Tatum, I feel like nobody ever has anything good to say about Jason Tatum. That's why when I made that in a video about a month or two ago now, I feel like he was one of the more underappreciated stars in the league, because I feel like whenever Jason Tatum's name gets brought up, it's nothing but negative. It's nothing. I understand you're looking at Jason Tatum sometimes and you're like, that's a questionable shot right there. But like, Jason Tatum has been good this entire playoff run. He has other people to get involved on this playoff run, on this team. They're doing it without Kristaps Porzingis. But whenever somebody says Boston Celtics, it automatically is like some negative comment about this team. I don't get it. This team has yet to get over the hump. If anything, I want to see this team win. I want to see Jason Tatum get a ring. I want to see Jaylen Brown get a ring. Because they've been knocking on the door for years now. But I just don't understand. I feel like every time Boston Celtics get brought up, it's only negative comments about it. I don't understand it. From a neutral fan's point of view, when I look at this team, yes, you can nitpick on every single team in the NBA. But I feel like you have to also look at the good and the bad. You can't just always look at the bad and the negative with the Boston Celtics. But maybe that's just how good of a team they are. It's where you have to nitpick. They've been the best team in ball all year long. All year long, they've been the best team in ball. But it's to the point where, like, I feel like they get no love. They get no love, I feel like. But, I mean, going into the finals, they're probably going to play the Dallas Mavericks. Now, up to this point, the finals won't start till next Thursday. So, looking at that, you'll probably have, like, 5.5 weeks, I want to say it is, with Kristaps Porzingis fully getting rest. So it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to be fully healthy, ready to go game 1 against probably the Dallas Mavericks, like I said, but that series isn't over there. So looking at that, my main overview of the Celtics is like, I expect them to do this. I have high expectations for the Celtics, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to just ignore the good shit that they're doing and only think about the nitpicking and the bad shit that they're doing because I have high expectations for them. Like, they're handling business. If you don't think handling business is only losing 2 games this entire playoff run and going to the finals, you don't know what handling business is. Did they drop a game? Have they looked sloppy in some games? Yes. These are also NBA caliber fucking teams that they're playing. It's the playoffs. The intensity is high. Boston Celtics are a good team. They are not invincible. They're not, and they don't have Kristaps Porzingis, which is the X factor on this team. But nobody wants to talk about the injuries when it comes to the Celtics when they talk about the Heat or the Cavs or the Pacers. It's going to be interesting to see what we get from the Celtics in the finals if Kristaps Porzingis is healthy, because I do think they definitely need him if they want to go win the series against the Dallas Mavericks or the Minnesota Timberwolves. Looking at the other side, Dallas probably going to the NBA Finals up 3-0. The defense, I understand the offense, but the defense of the Dallas Mavericks has been phenomenal. They've made it tough on this Wolves team. I mean, I just think going into kind of my overview of this series, Wolves kind of got off the gas when they shouldn't have. I feel like definitely game 1, definitely game 2 they should have had. Blown leads in both of those games. But you had a chance in game 3. Anthony Edwards gave you a great third quarter, tie the game going into the fourth, but you had no help down the stretch. Well, I really want to kind of start this off talking about the Timberwolves in a way, because I feel like it's more of what the Timberwolves aren't doing compared to what Dallas is doing. Dallas is playing great defense, and Luka and Kyrie have been a problem. But I'm really looking towards what are you getting out of Karl-Anthony Towns at this point? Right? Here's another question. Well, not really a question, more so of an idea. I feel like Karl-Anthony Towns recently in this past series finally escaped they should move off of Karl-Anthony Towns in a trade, right? That's been the kind of narrative that I've seen the past couple of years. Karl-Anthony Towns should be traded, this and that, right? I feel like he got his name out of the dirt in terms of being traded. He just put himself right back in it. With this play this series. Not just the play of him, the play of Naz Reid. Sixth man of the year. Naz Reid has outplayed Karl-Anthony Towns. For sure. These 3 games this series. And you can even say he's outplayed him this entire playoff run. There's an argument there. Argument can be made. Naz Reid has given the Timberwolves the ability to always have the door open to trading Karl-Anthony Towns, because you can slip Naz Reid right into that starting lineup. And he might be a better fit than Cat. That's the thing. And he's a lot cheaper. So I think the play of Naz Reid and the play of Karl-Anthony Towns, Naz Reid has definitely outplayed him, I feel like, this entire playoff run. And it's so interesting because he gives them the ability to get better in a way, because with his play, he has opened the door to possibly still being able to trade Karl-Anthony Towns. It's such an interesting dynamic. He's really been the person that I feel like has always had that foot in the door. He should probably be starting on any given roster in the league. And with the play of Karl-Anthony Towns in this conference finals, I feel like we're going to go into the offseason. That's going to be another question for the Wolves. And I feel like Karl-Anthony Towns, with the play he had against the Denver Nuggets throughout stretches, you could think, man, is his name finally going to be out of the trade rumors this offseason? I feel like his name's going to be right back in it. And going on to the flip side, Rudy Gobert. He was somebody that I feel like was getting his name out of the conversation of can't play in the playoffs. I feel like he's right back in there. I understand the Denver Nuggets and the Dallas Mavericks are 2 completely different teams, but there isn't a defense that has worked for the Defensive Player of the Year to be able to play against 2 guards that really utilize that pick and roll in Kyrie and Luka Doncic. The bigs have been superb for the Dallas Mavericks. I know Derek Lively had like a neck sprain. Hopefully he's ready to go for the finals because they only got 1 game left in the series. Looking at Daniel Gafford, he's been great. I mean, he had the exclamation point in Game 3 to close that game out with the lob and the block. But everything that the Minnesota Timberwolves have done from a defense that looked like it was one of the best defenses we've seen in quite some time, they've had no answer for Luka and Kyrie. They've had none. Derrick Jones Jr. has had some great games in this series. PJ Washington has cooled off, but I feel like every time late in these games, and all these games have been close, PJ Washington is hitting a timely bucket. And he's been having giving Karl-Anthony Towns a ton of trouble because he's an athletic, bigger wing that has the foot speed to keep up and the strength to keep up with Karl-Anthony Towns. But here's my problem with Karl-Anthony Towns. It's like, when you look at last game, the 0 for 8 from 3 is huge. But it's like when you're looking at last game for Game 3, he got off a little bit and got into a rhythm in that, I want to say, it was the third quarter where he was just getting to the basket. Mind you, this is when Derek Lively was not in the game. They had Dwight Powell in the game and Daniel Gafford was on the bench. So yes, but I understand, but it's the aggressiveness of Cat getting to the basket and getting downhill and getting to the free throw line for me. That's the point I want to kind of get at and attack with this, because looking at Karl-Anthony Towns, I feel like he's just settling. I feel like he knows Dallas is kind of like taking away that drive for him, and he's just settling for threes. If they're not falling, there isn't a switch that goes off when they're not falling to where he's going to switch it up and because he has the ability to get to the basket and post up. I feel like that switch doesn't go off for him when he's struggling from 3 to let me go get in rhythm by getting to the basket and getting to the free throw line. That switch has not clicked for him and getting to the basket. And it's really a huge reason why they're down in this series, because you got a better Anthony Edwards game for sure, especially in the third quarter when he gave you an opportunity to really win this game and tying it up going into the fourth almost. Like, Karl-Anthony Towns has been a no-show. Like, they're almost in a situation where I see like the Pacers, where they should probably have a game or 2 in this series. But late game execution has killed them. Game 2, the Anthony Edwards turnover, when he was trying to pass it to Naz Reid out of a shot, he probably just should have shot the first look. Naz Reid missing that game winner. He had a good look at it. Like, looking at some of the late game stuff that has happened in the series, obviously Luka and Kyrie have been phenomenal late in this series when it comes to closing games, for sure, so I can't really put everything on the Timberwolves, but it does need to come to a light where the Timberwolves have been in all of these games. They have been in all these games. Now, do I also think that they have been gassed at some points throughout these games? Yes. They just won 7 games with the defending champions in a tough 7 games. So looking at that, I just think there's going to be more questions this offseason around Karl-Anthony Towns because of the play of Naz Reid and also the play of Karl-Anthony Towns himself. I think the possible trade is going to always be open for the Minnesota Timberwolves because they have a Naz Reid kind of player. But even in these games where you're getting a Jaden McDaniels offensive punch, which I love to see because he's really growing his offensive game. And when he's aggressive, he has the Luka matchup. So they need to try to, as much as they can, work Luka out defensively. But even then, Luka's been playing some of the best defense I've seen him play in his career. He is fully bought into the defensive end. Enough to where he's not just a cone. So looking at this from the Minnesota Timberwolves point of view, it's like, you've been in a lot of these games, but the late game obviously not having an answer for Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. But it's also, you're still in a lot of these games. It's just late game execution that has come back to bite you. Looking at it, I do want to say, give flowers to Derek Lively. No, he's hurt with the neck sprain. Like I said, I hope he's back and ready to go for the NBA Finals. If they do make it there, they're up 3-0, and that's never happened before. But I'm always going to keep the door open for something like that. Hope he gets back, and he's been phenomenal. Has a rookie to be able to come in and give them the rim protection and the lob threat and the rebounding and the energy that Derek Lively brings is huge for them. Daniel Gafford's been huge. I mean, for a team, they're on the brink of also like the Pacers and one of the most important trade deadline acquisitions in Daniel Gafford. He's been phenomenal for this team, and they're already gearing up to get Maxi Kleber back. He's somebody that can also give you minutes at the 4 or the 5 that can space the floor more. And a team against the Boston Celtics, they're going to need all the versatility they can get, especially in that front court, they have with Kristaps Porzingis healthy, because I really like, we'll get into kind of like, well, I'll have a video breaking down like the finals matchup and everything else like that, but it's going to be interesting to see kind of like the versatility of the Dallas Mavericks matchup with a team like Boston. Because I think Maxi Kleber, with him coming off of an injury for sure, is somebody that could give you good minutes. I probably trust Maxi Kleber more than Dwight Powell to give me minutes, right? Especially with the ability he has to space the floor. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do match up with the Boston Celtics. We had kind of like go more into a deeper dive on that whole thing. But with the Minnesota Timberwolves, I mean, you're in a lot of these games, late game execution. I mean, obviously, like I said, Luka and Kyrie have been phenomenal in closing games, late game. But it's just late game execution. Like, why is Rudy Gobert in the game at that certain point in time when you know Luka or Kyrie's going to hunt him out in the switch? And then the switch happens. Jaden McDaniels goes on the switch. There's the whole reaction of Jaden McDaniels kind of knowing what was going to happen as soon as the switch happened. It's just more so some of the coaching things. I'm like, why don't we run more Cat and Naz Reid, giving you more versatility defensively and more kind of not really giving Dallas the ability. It's still obviously going to happen as Luka and Kyrie, the switch onto a big, but make it a better matchup for them at least, because I feel like the Naz Reid and Cat minutes have been great when they've happened this playoff run. You have nothing but spaced out on the court. You have 2 bigs that can shoot and rebound. Yes, the defense is not there of like a Rudy Gobert in terms of rim protection, but it's still there enough. But it's more so offensively, I'm more so questioning some of the coaching I'm seeing from the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like, why are we not running more Cat and Naz Reid lineups to give Anthony Edwards more spacing to get to the basket? Because when you look at the Daniel Gafford, when he posterized Daniel Gafford, that not having, like, obviously incredible play, but Daniel Gafford was able to rotate and get into the help side because he doesn't have to leave the paint ever. That's my whole idea with this. Like, in terms of if you see Anthony Edwards struggling with his game offensively, why would we not put 2 other scoring options and floor spacers in Cat and Naz Reid? I understand Cat's been struggling from 3. It's just the idea of being able to add more spacing for Anthony Edwards to get to the basket. Because when you have a rim protector like a Daniel Gafford, a Lively, it's going to make it even harder on Anthony Edwards with a defender like Derrick Jones Jr., who's already athletic as can be. A Josh Green, who's already as physical as can be on Anthony Edwards. So they've been making it a tough matchup for Anthony Edwards. He struggled coming into the series. I feel like he took a lot of pride on going into the series and trying to guard Kyrie Irving. I think that kind of already gassed them out in general because Kyrie came out super active and super aggressive to start this series. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do because by the time I'm filming this, Game 4 is tonight. But I feel like the Timberwolves have been in all of these games, but I feel like late game execution and kind of questionable coaching decisions have kind of led them to this point. Obviously, it's the play of Luka and Kyrie Irving as well, but it's just like, it's like the why have Rudy Gobert in that situation when you know they're probably going to take a three to win the game? Like, why not have a little bit more versatility in there? Like, you've gotten good enough performances from your role players, like a Jane McDaniels, Mike Conley, Kyle Anderson has had moments. Like, you've gotten enough from the other supporting guys to be in these games, even with Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns playing poorly to their standards. And in most of these games, Dallas, a good three-point shooting team, hasn't shot the three ball well. So, and you're not winning those games. So it's like, I don't know an avenue where the Timberwolves win unless you have Anthony Edwards just exploding for like 40 or 50. And even then, it's like, Dallas hasn't really shot up to their caliber. That's why they've been kind of coming in these games from behind because they haven't been shooting the ball so effectively like the Dallas Mavericks team usually does. So I don't really know. It's going to be interesting to see in Game 4 what kind of Timberwolves team we do get. Do we get the Timberwolves team that is still hungry, still feeling like they can win the series, or are we going to get the Timberwolves team that kind of lays down? It's going to be interesting to see. By the time I'm filming this, Game 4 was happening tonight. This episode will be up tomorrow morning. And by that time, if the Dallas Mavericks do win, we will have an entire week with no ball, basically, because the finals don't start till June 6th. So I'll definitely have a lot more episodes coming out, kind of talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves, what could be next for them, because they are down 3-0. But like I said, we have a ton of good stuff coming this summer. Interviews, gaming content. We're definitely hopping into more off-season stuff. Probably get another mock draft with trades going into, because tomorrow, I believe, is the day where players in the draft have to decide if they're coming back to college or if they're going into the draft. So I'll probably have another mock draft kind of incorporating that with like the trades I want to do and the trades I could definitely see happening in the drafts. I probably do have 2 more mock drafts for sure before the NBA draft comes out, just talking about content I do have coming up in the future. Looking at that, that's really all I have for this episode. Let's talk about it. Thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk podcast. Hope you tune in to future episodes.